Jonathan Montgomery is up next. Big fan of the show and currently listening while I'm deployed overseas. Thank you for your service, Jonathan. I grew up in the Jerry Lawler territory, and Jerry probably wrestled in every high school gymnasium in a 100-mile radius of Memphis. Did you ever work in the high school gyms?
Oh yeah, there was a lot of high school gyms that we wrestled in, like in Mid South and different like little communities, that yeah, we would go into a high school gym. But and that's the one thing I can't ever. But Jerry Lawler, you know, I can't remember ever wrestling Jerry.
I feel like as I was doing research, I recently saw where you had a match with Lawler somewhere along the way. I don't know when or where. I'm gonna have to dig back into what I was doing for research, but I feel like I saw where you had a match with Lawler, and I want to say that you went over.
Yeah, I just can't remember. If I did, I didn't have but maybe one.
Yeah,
And Jerry and I get along. I got no problem with Jerry. Of course, I never worked under him. In other words, he was Memphis,
hmm
the Memphis territory.
So yeah, your perspective might change on him if you had, worked for him or for Jerry Jarrett, which, Jerry Jarrett, one of the greatest promoters of all time. But, you do always hear that like, man, if it wasn't a good house, you'd find out because you weren't gonna get a very strong check at the end of the night.
But I'm going to tell you somebody that Jerry wouldn't do a job for.
Who's that?
Elvis.
Wouldn't do a job for Elvis. I'd put over Elvis.
No, I'm
No, I
teasing,
know.
really. I mean, it's kind of like, and I've never asked Jerry that question. I would, I want to. I mean, you would think. I mean, Jerry Lawler's from Memphis. You would think that somewhere along the way you had to meet him.
Y- I would think so, yeah.
You would think so. I
Especially,
don't know for
you
sure,
and I
but
discussed that Elvis was a wrestling fan, so,
yeah,
I would think that Elvis has crossed Jerry's path at some point or another.
yeah,
Um,
yeah. I heard several stories about like when he was a little boy, and the old wrestler that I knew that would have been there in that era was a guy named Tretch Phillips, and we were in the Memphis the you know the auditorium there. It's a big round building. It's a lot like the one here in Jackson, and he said that when Elvis was a little kid that we would park in the back, and all these little kids would offer to carry our bags in, for us so they could get in free. And that they let all the little kids in free. Elvis was one of those little kids. And they said later when he's not when he was a huge star, but when he was becoming this household name, that they would sneak him into the building early. And he said, and we weren't in the building. He said, when next time you go in that building, look up top and there's a catwalk. You can see, and it comes from two sides. Actually, it comes from all sides, but right in the middle, right over the ring, there's a place up there. And they would sneak him in there, and he would get up, he'd climb up there, and it's high enough to where you look up there, you could see somebody, but it's high enough that there's no way in hell you could tell who it was.
wow.
Well, I just imagine how many people looked up there and said, "I wonder who that is."
Yep. And here it's the king of rock.
Yeah,
That would be something, man.
it would be.
Hey, that's telling too. Elvis Presley, a big fan of professional wrestling. Wrestling appeals to all people from all walks of life. It's like a
Yeah.
universal language.
Well, they say even some of the outfits that Elvis wore. I mean, he had the big, like the jacket that he'd come out in,
huge
and
collar.
he had a belt, and the belt was like, I mean, kind of like a wrestling championship belt.
Yeah, he'd have the giant buckle on it, and it would be
Yeah,
all yeah, wow.
yeah,
I never put that together. That's awesome.
yeah.
Ted, the question about you wrestling in like high school gyms, it brought up a question I wanted to ask you. We all hear the stories about terrible conditions in locker rooms for smaller venues the wrestlers work in. I've heard the story about like some guy went in to take a shower and here it was just a hose like draped over a 2 by 4. So I'm wondering what was the worst condition you experienced in like a small venue locker room? Anything stand out?
Wow. I mean, there's been maybe a time or two, and I can't remember exactly where we would do like we and sometimes like Bill Watts would and we would do double shows. We do like we would on the weekends we'd do a matinee on Saturday afternoon and a show that night, and then we would go in and do a matinee on Sunday morning and then a show that night.
Mhm.
I can remember Bill flying us from like we would do a show and then we would get up and we would fly from I think we'd fly out of Baton Rouge, fly into Oklahoma City, and we would do we would I mean we'd leave early out of Baton Rouge, fly to Oklahoma City, do a matinee, an afternoon show that and then they had cars there to pick us up and drive us to Tulsa and do another show that night.
Ooh,
I mean, there were some weekends where we would do, four shows in 2 days,
brutal.
Saturday and Sunday. Yeah, that's brutal. But back to that question, I don't know. If yeah, and I've been in some. I mean, I guess there's one place. What was that place called? Oh my gosh, I think it was called La Ranger, Louisiana.
Alright.
And it was like that. I mean, I wouldn't, I would just put my stuff back on, get in my car, and shower when I got home. I mean, it was nasty.
Man, when you wanna put on, like, your street clothes after you had a sweaty wrestling match, that's pretty telling that, not a
Yeah. Well, and sometimes, just depending on the time of the year, right? But sometimes I would just, throw my jacket on, my ring jacket, and sweats or something, and because you got to when you knew it's like, okay, where are we? Okay, I gotta throw in my I gotta throw my sweats in my bag because I'm not gonna shower there.
ooh, man, the life of a wrestler not always glamorous, huh?
Yeah, no.